If you're focused on God and your relationship with him, he makes all your other relationships work out because it's in right priority. But if you're focused on another relationship with your spouse or with your kids or with other family members, and your priority is not your relationship with God, it seems like all the relationships get messed up in one way or another. You don't have a good relationship with all those people, all your family, and you don't have a relationship with God. It's all out of whack. He says our first relationship has to be with him. He has to be priority in our lives. This is what he says about that, about the two greatest commandments. And this is really simple, and I love that he put it in this way in Matthew 22, verse 37. He was asked, what are the two greatest commandments? Well, he said, what's the greatest commandment? He was asked. And he says, this is the greatest commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. What's fascinating is, though, he says this right after. He says, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. God immediately shows us the priority of our life. Number one, you shall love the Lord your God. Number two, you love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two greatest commandments in that order. So he's showing us right there that our relationship with God is number one in our life. It has to be number one. If you don't have that relationship, it's going to mess up all your other relationships. But if you do have that relationship and it's paramount in your life, then it makes everything else start to line up because they're in right priority. God has to come first. Just before that verse, in Matthew 6:33, he says this. He says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Now, in the context of this verse, he's talking about material things. He's talking about your sustenance. He's saying, seek first the kingdom of God, and then God will provide your sustenance. He'll provide for you. He is your provider. But it applies to this as well. God is saying, you got to seek him first, and then everything else will be added to you. It's so easy to get our priorities all mixed up and be going after the things of the world, the things that are temporary, instead of after the things of God. Do you understand that your relationship with God is an eternal relationship? That means it goes on forever. Forever. Even after you die here, you're going to have a relationship with God in heaven forever. In fact, he calls you his bride. He says you will be his bride. But when you die here, your relationship with your spouse is going to end. You will no longer be married to your spouse because you'll be married to the Lord. You're his bride in heaven. You can't be married to somebody else. You're his bride. So what he's showing us is that relationship is the relationship that we need to be focusing on. That relationship between us and him is the thing that has to be paramount in our life. All the other relationships will pass away, but your relationship with him will never pass away. He is the only one that truly offers you unconditional love. Unconditional love. Let me show it to you in this way. Remember when Peter denies Jesus? You know, they're at the Last Supper and they're eating and drinking together, and the Lord tells all of his disciples, I'm going to be given over into the hands of the leaders, and they're going to kill me. And every single one of you is going to leave me. Not one of you is going to stay with me. And Peter speaks up and goes, Lord, I will stay with you. I'm ready even to die for you. I know, right? I'm ready even to die for you. And Jesus tells him, Peter, look, man, this very night, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times, even that you know me. Even that you know me. And it comes to pass, they're in the garden. The posse comes out to collect Jesus, and everybody runs away from him. And Peter is then following at a distance. But then they get to the house of the high priest, Caiaphas, and Peter's sitting there warming himself by the fire with the servants, and they're all asking him at different times, wait, you were with Jesus, weren't you? Peter goes, oh no, I wasn't with him. Oh no. And again, he's asked, you were with Jesus? Nope, I wasn't. And then the third time it says he starts to call down curses. It says, I don't even know that guy at all. Look, let me give you this hypothetical. Think about this scenario happening between you and your spouse. Let's say you and your spouse went to a party. You walk into the party together, but then she sees a friend of hers and you see a friend of yours, and so you break off and you're talking to your friends or whatever. What if in that scenario, you're sitting there talking to your friend, and a lady comes up to you and says, hey, are you single? And you say, yeah, I'm single. And then she says to you, well, what about that lady you walked in with? And you say, I don't know her at all. I don't know who she is. And that doesn't just happen one time, but that happens 3 times. Do you think your wife is going to love you after that? No. And she shouldn't. So there you go. All your wife's love is conditional. I just proved it to you right there. Just kidding. I'm just kidding, you guys. But seriously. But you see my point, okay? Our love is conditional to a point. It's unconditional until you get to that point, and then it's conditional after that. But what happened with Jesus and Peter? Jesus knew. What is this? I think it's in John, where it says there's only one gospel that says this. It's fascinating. It says they're there at the high priest's house, and Peter, at that last time, he's calling down the curses, saying he doesn't know Jesus at all. And it says, in that moment, the rooster crowed, and Jesus turned and looked at Peter, as if to say, I know what just happened. Jesus heard the rooster crow, and he turned and looked at Peter, and he says, that is when Peter started to bawl, and he left, went out weeping, because he understood what just happened. But what happens after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection? He tells his disciples to go meet him by the Sea of Galilee again. And they're out fishing. And Jesus is walking along the shore. And the disciples figure out that it's him. And Peter jumps in the water and swims to shore. And they're sitting around eating. And Jesus has this one-on-one moment that is so intimate with Peter. And he says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter goes, yeah, Lord, you know I love you. And then he asks him again, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. And then the third time, Peter, do you love me? And at this point, Peter's like broken. Lord, come on. You see, in that moment, even though Peter had just denied, he had known Jesus 3 times right in front of him. After everything that Peter had been through with Jesus. Remember, Peter's the guy that was in the boat when he threw the net out. after he'd been fishing all night and caught nothing, zero. And then he throws the net out at Jesus' command, and it's filled full of fish, so full that his boat started to sink. And then he's on the mountain with Jesus, and he's transfigured. And he sees Moses and Elijah. And he hears God say, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." All this time, all the miracles, everything that Jesus had done, everything that he had said, Peter was there for. Peter was there when he rose a person from the dead. In fact, not just one, but 3 people. Peter was there. He was in his inmost circle. And yet, after all of that, Peter denied that he even knew the guy. And yet, God's love is such that in that moment, Peter went to Jesus, and Jesus restored Peter back to his rightful place. Let me tell you, there is no person on the face of this earth that would have done that for you. There's not one. God alone loves unconditionally. He wants to love you in that way, and he will love you in that way. But your relationship with him has to be first. It has to be number one.